Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Five events down and one still to go. 3 drivers in contention still for the series, 3 more races to settle. Who takes away the inaugural BRSCC Winter esports series for 2022-23? 3 drivers in contention, Mikey Doble, Will Redford and John Higgins Jr. One of them will leave tonight as the first ever esports series winner in an officially sanctioned BRSCC esports series. The other 2 might have to come again and try again next time. But it's going to be tricky because this is a circuit which not many of the drivers, if any, have ever driven before in real life. No less, not put any many laps in the sim. And it's one of USA's finest, and that's one of the world's most finest and most toughest corners in the world, the corkscrew. It is WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, California, USA. And it will be a circuit that lends itself to great racing, and particularly in Mazda MX-5s, both real life and we hope tonight in the final 3 races of our Winter Esports Series. Good evening, everybody. Scott Woodward here, along with Andy Thompson and Samuni Kumo on cameras and production for us as well. It all comes down to this: 21 points after drop score separating the top 3. It really is going to be make or break. Someone leaves tonight with the series. Big question, of course, has got to be, as we look at the table, who is it going to be? It's going to be incredibly close out there.
Yeah, good evening, Scott. Good evening, viewers. Yeah, Laguna Seca, the last 3 rounds of this 6-round championship. It's been an epic one, and obviously the first one outside of the UK. But you can see there the championship standing. It's sort of like you said, Scott, a grandstand finish between Mikey Doble, John Higgins, and Will Redford. We saw early on in the season Will Redford really taking command in choke of the championship, but sort of falling away in the mid-pack. And then we've seen Mikey Doble and John Higgins very much pick up the mantle we saw last time out in Brands Hatch. Mikey Doble had an excellent day. Will Redford again sort of faltered a little bit at the start of the opening rounds, but came on strong towards the end, and we can see they're tied for second place with John Higgins. So it's really close at the top of the championship, and it's anyone's game. And you know, a way a championship really wants to be, Scott, you know, fighting it out all the way down to the last round. It's going to be an epic 3 rounds here at Laguna Seca.
Yeah, I think the points we have on there is possibly not quite the ones we have from post Brands Hatch, so apologies for that. But I've got the points in front of me here, which have been updated by Will Blackwell Chambers. As it currently sits on my screen, Mikey Doble has a 10-point lead on drop scores with 1,184 points. Will Redford, who you see on camera here in car number 42, he sits on 1,174. And then John Higgins Jr., who's won The only 2 races in which either Mikey Doble or Will Redford haven't won this season. He's third with 1,163. So 21 points makes the difference between the 3 drivers at the top of the field. And it is at a circuit where they have plenty of practice in the sim, but it really is something that's kind of like no other that we have in the UK. A comparative circuit could be something like maybe Alton Park, maybe Cadwell Park or so, but Laguna Seca is one of those fantastic old historic circuits. It's been going since the late 50s. This particular layout's been in place since 1996 because they tightened up the last couple of corners after the end of 1995, and it's been a very fast and flowing circuit that's hosted IndyCar, it's hosted Can-Am, it's hosted sports cars, it's hosted countless races in the American Le Mans series, and of course several IndyCar finales. And another series which is also prominent around here too in real life is the Mazda MX-5 Cup that races in the US. Always big fun racing to watch to race here, and in particularly these cars as well. This will be a new challenge for some drivers. It doesn't take long for the cream to rise to the top, though, because it is Redford, Doble and Higgins in the top 3, and they're lapping at round about the sort of pace that I expected top drivers to be. Look at some of the track guides that exist for this circuit, and there's about 7 or 8 for this track car combination if you have a search on YouTube. A good lap time is somewhere from the low 38s all the way through the 37s and into the high 36s. You know, Will Redford's punched in a 36.7. It's faster than any track guide I've ever seen out there.
Yeah, it certainly is a very technical track. We're just riding on board at the moment with Redford. It's a really undulating track for elevation changes are really severe on this. So the drivers have really got to be aware on that opening lap coming down to the Andretti hairpin turn number 2, which is a double apex corner. You know, it always invites that deep lunge into that corner where we've seen in the past on many championships that I've commentated around here, you know, quite a few incidents coming around that turn number 2. And then we just saw there Will Redford coming up Rainhill Straight, coming up to the corkscrews you mentioned earlier. Very much a blind corner, so you've really got to make sure that you get your braking marker point well established for that, because you can quite easily see quite a few cars overshooting the top of the corkscrew and end up going off the track. So it's going to be a technical track for the drivers to do, and like you said, a lot of them won't have driven this in real life, but hopefully they've had plenty of practice around this track in the sim world, and we really have a good grandstand finish for these final 3 rounds of the season.
Yeah, definitely so. It will be quite good to see some other drivers out there that can start to get themselves towards the front of the field. A couple of drivers I'm seeing in here that have managed to make a couple of strides in pace. Tom Griffiths, for one, he is some 8.5 tenths off pole. He's looking quite congested from about roughly sort of third or fourth place downwards, about half a second covering 4th down to about 10th or 11th. Tom Griffiths, who has raced MX-5s in real life, as well as BMWs in the BMW Compact Cup, the same sort of championship which Mikey Doble won last year in 2022. He's done pretty good. Now here's a couple other drivers who have also been pretty prominent in BMWs recently. Steve Roberts, who's also raced the likes of Mazda MX-5s and also Formula 4s. He's in there in P5. He's had 1 or 2 up and down points of fortune. He's had race weekends where he started pretty quickly, or started races quite far to the field, and then just got caught up in either his own incident or somebody else's incident, and that's pushed him down the order and forced him to try and fight back as the night's gone on. So hopefully he will look to try and pick himself up in a high starting spot. 5th looks like where he might well be, unless he can punch in a quicker lap time in the last 2.5 minutes of this qualifying session. And then he wants to try and stay there as high as possible. He could get one of his best finishes of the season tonight if he can stay out of trouble on a circuit that's certainly notorious for that as well. Somebody else who's had a couple of podiums so far this season, Matt Kendall, P6 in the current qualifying session. He's up there fighting for the top 5 in points alongside Will Blackwell-Chambers. So Matt's been steadily getting quicker and quicker, and he was part of that lead group in the last couple of meetings, particularly that massive 4 or 5 car fight that we had between the likes of Mikey Doble and Redford and John Higgins Jr., along with Matt Higgins and Will Blackwell-Chambers. It was those 5 drivers that were the cream of the crop at the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit last time out. He'll want to try and keep on improving. A very impressive run also from, looks like, Andrew Tibbs in 9th position. One of the relative newcomers at the end of the season, but 9th fastest for him so far, 1.2 seconds off the pace. He's looking pretty strong. And also someone who's been getting pretty quicker, Chris Etheridge. So he's up in P10 there. A couple of drivers a little bit further back than I expected. We look down the rest of the order. But the good thing is on this one, as we've seen throughout this series, Andy, is that it really has been a tightening up of the field, in that drivers have been able to find more pace, find more confidence in these cars. They all run baseline stock setups. So they're all fixed, which means that you can't do very much tweaking, if any tweaking, to the major components at all. and it means it's down on driver skill alone, and that's allowed some of the drivers that started a bit far off the pace at the start of the season to catch up through the rounds as they got used to the car and the setup, to now when they've got to this point here at Laguna Seca, they're more in tune, they're more confident, they're more happy with how this car drives, and Laguna Seca, we could see some personal bests from quite a few drivers here tonight, getting the most out of this MX-5 finally here at this final round.
Yeah, 100%. And if we go back all the way back to last year, where we went to our very first round, it was a lot of the drivers' very first experience on iRacing. You could very much see the inexperience across the field and the differences and the gulf between the drivers that are used to the sim racing, like Will Redford, who obviously won them 3 opening rounds quite easily. But then, as you mentioned, during the season, a lot of the drivers are getting used to the way this car handles on this sim, and basically really closing up the gap. In the last couple of rounds we've seen, you mentioned there Matt Kendall, Tom Griffiths, Lee Britton has always been there, and Andrew Tibbs obviously first round out at Brands Hatch last time out, you know, really closing the gap. So it's not all been Redford, Doble and John Higgins Jr., but a lot more people are now joining into that frame. You mentioned last time out in Brands Hats we had a group of 5 at the front in the 3 races, almost constantly out there, and I'm expecting tonight's racing to be a lot better, but a different track with a different type of driving style that needs to be done, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the 3 races.
We'll see what happens in just a moment as qualifying has now concluded. Cars started to form themselves up for the first of our 3 races tonight here at Laguna Seca, and this is how it looks. The 3 championship series contenders are all towards the front. Will Redford on a storming pole position by over 0.4 of a second on pole. He needs to be up towards the front and keeping out of trouble to get himself into that possible series winning position. Then Mikey Doble, points leader, alongside him on the front row. Steve Roberts did improve in that session after we talked about it, and he is now up into 3rd on the grid from John Higgins Jr. Then Will Blackwood Chambers and Tom Griffiths come next on the 3rd row, followed by Matt Kendall and Lee Britton. Then Andrew Tibbs with a very impressive run in 9th. Chris Etheridge rounding out the top 10. Then it's Keith Dalton and Patrick Fletcher, who is a regular in the MX-5 Super Cup. Good to see him on the grid for one of the first few times. His team boss, Luke Herbert, 3-time Super Cup champion, is 13th on the grid alongside his driver Tom Selden. Then it's John Pethick and Richard Harwood from Pete Smith and Rowan Lundy. Joseph Doble, sibling to Mikey, is alongside Richard Wootton, and Aidan Edgar and Harry England from Fiesta Juniors. James Riley and Robert Bannister round out the 12th row of the grid. And I think that is all of our 24 runners and riders for tonight's festivities. It is going to be a tense affair at the front of the field, but it's the 3 cars you want to watch for. The white, black and green car of Will Redford, car number 42. It is car number 88 of Mikey Doble, which is the blue, white, 2-tone blue and white car alongside him on the front row. And just off screen, it is the black and blue machine of John Higgins Jr. starting 4th, all 3 of which are going to be in contention. We've got a few seconds to go until the green light goes out and we get racing underway for the final time tonight. It's been an amazing first season for BRSCC in the world of esports, and this is hopefully will set the benchmark for some more competitions going forwards. But for now, we've got this one to settle and bring to a close. So it's Redford, Doble and Higgins Jr., 3 for the crown, 3 more races at Laguna Seca. The final event of the BRSCC Winter Esports Series is all set to get underway. The lights are out, and we're race number 1 at Laguna Seca is go. Strong start from Redford, who keeps the lead from pole position. Doble slots in behind him, as does Steve Roberts, as they make their way through turn 1, down towards the Andretti hairpin for the first time, and Redford immediately has to go defensive on the inside line. There goes Higgins Jr. trying to pick up 3rd, which he does. It's in past Steve Roberts, and also a quite quick start for Will Blackwood Chambers, last year's real world defending MX-5 Super Cup champion from 2022. File their way in through turn 3 for the first time. A little twitch from Blackwood Chambers, going door to door, banging door handles there with Steve Roberts. And they make their way out through turn 4 and onto the first run towards the first climb up the hill towards the corkscrew. So far in the first couple of corners, it seemed pretty clean. There's lots of mayhem going on mid-pack, as you'd expect, but it is Doble and Redford in the mix. Patrick Fletcher's first start to an esports race doesn't go the way he wants, and neither does it go the way of both either Chris Etheridge or Harry England, so those 2 have hit drama. I was about to say it's been pretty much drama-free from that first couple of starts, but at least at the front, Redford where he needs to be, with Doble and Higgins Jr. on his tail up towards the corkscrew for the first time.
Yeah, it definitely is, and was relatively clean start at the front, certainly through Andretti. Always we see Steve Roberts going very deep there, tagging the back of Matt Kendall coming down the corkscrew, but luckily managing to keep the car pointing in the same way. Very often coming down that corkscrew, you can be facing the wrong way, but lots of door banging the first visit there. Oh, as again, Matt Kendall gets another hit there. I think that was from Andrew Tibbs. Coming out of turn number 7 there, or turn 9, and yeah, he's been a bit of a battle there as Matt Kendall finding himself down in 15th position at the moment, down 8 places from where he started. So not the best of start for Matt Kendall after very much bigging him up, I suppose, at the beginning of how well he's done in the previous rounds, but still has time to try and fight back. But back at the front, Will Redford commanding his lead. He's literally got 0.4 of a second there over his championship rival there, Mikey Doble, in second. John Higgins Jr. managing to get up third, a little bit off the pace though, 1.3 seconds behind Redford. Then those three slightly getting away before Robert, the big group we're watching at the moment, with Roberts all the way down pretty much to Lundy. As oh, again, Steve Roberts having pretty much terrible start to this first race here, Scott.
Yeah, once again hitting strike. We talked about it in qualifying. The fact he starts weekend's pretty strong, and then has it go to a bit of a nosedive. He's now dropped all the way down to 20th position, past behind Chris Etheridge, who goes through. He was one of the cars that got caught up in that first lap spin. The 2 cars that we lost at the end of the first lap was both in the pits, James Riley and Patrick Fletcher. Also, we saw John Pettit coming out of pit lane 2, so he obviously got caught up in that as well. Phil makes its way towards the corkscrew for the second time. If you've never seen the corkscrew, it is one of the most notorious sequences of corners in the world. I'm going to try and get it as straight and as smooth a line through that massive dip downwards where the road just drops away from you and gets huge compression right at the bottom of the hill as you go through the chicane. It's one of the trickiest and most difficult corners in world motorsport to try and negotiate, and particularly when it starts to kick up plenty of dust and dirt online, it can get it even more tricky. Joseph Doble, meanwhile, in the background you saw, was off the road and wide at the penultimate corner. He's carried on. He looks like he's staying in 13th place for now. The second lap, and Redford still leads the way then from Doble, Higgins Jr. and then Britton.
Matt Kendall looks like he's made a really good comeback. Obviously, we saw at the start getting very much door banging. Currently back up to 11th place, so gained 4 places in that last lap at the moment, and just outside the top 10 is he. But Michael Doble's currently in second place, trying to track down Will Redford in first, and it's going to be interesting to see how Will approaches these 3 races. He literally needs to put it all on the line. It's down to Mikey Doble really to lose, like you mentioned at the start, Scott. He's about 10 points ahead of Will Redford, so all he really needs to do to secure this championship is to be within 1 or 2 places of Will Redford all 3 of these races. So, you know, Will's got to try to put the pressure here on Mikey Doble to try and make sure that he can give him the best opportunity. But we've seen previously in quite a few of the races, Will Redford getting it slightly wrong and making self-imposed mistakes that's really put him under a lot of pressure in this championship, and probably a little bit why he's not well out in the championship lead at the moment. But Michael Doble is very much Mr. Consistent. We saw John Higgins Jr. there just past the screen in 3rd place, just a little bit off the place, around about 2.5 seconds off Michael Doble, 3 seconds off Will Redford. So at the moment he seems to be very much the bridesmaid in that trio for the championship at the moment. Will Redford leading out this race. Mikey Doble tracking him down, keeping around about half a second behind Will Redford at the moment. So obviously got 10 minutes left of this first race to go, so it's going to be interesting. Oh, as we see there, Lee Britton there getting it slightly wrong through the Andretti hairpin. A very tricky corner here in Laguna Seca. It's very deceiving with that double apex of trying to install their lead, getting it slightly wrong, losing quite a few positions in the process.
Yeah, Lee Britton, again, another driver who's had some up and down fortunes this season, and has had flashes of what he can really do in terms of pace, and been in and around the top 5 and hovering around the top 10. He's currently spun himself down to 16th, and he did that in front of a, I think, rather bemused Will Blackwell Chambers, who was in the mix there too. So that will be quite interesting to see how the rest of it plays out. It is quite interesting to see that both Will Redford and Mikey Doble, they are the 2 main pace setters as you'd expect, but the rate in which they're powering away from the rest of the pack is pretty extraordinary. John Higgins Jr. is in 3rd. We're watching Luke Herbert here in 13th place, back in with Tom Selden and Richard Wotton as they come over the crest and up towards the corkscrew once again. Now under brakes here, that's pretty tight from across the top front of him. There went Tom Selden. He just about holds it. It's got Britton to one side, Selden the other. It's a Luke Herbert sandwich in the mix because you've got all three of those drivers are Luke Herbert Racing drivers. It's their team boss that leads them at this point. In fact, Andy Tibbs is up there in 7th place. He's also part, I think, of the LHR stable. There's a huge thump at the inside curve in the penultimate corner from Richard Wooten, which puts him offline and possibly towards the pits if he's not careful. In fact, no, he's got it back onto the road behind both Tom Selden and Lee Britton now. In fact, behind Luke Herbert and also Lee Britton, Tom Selden there was the one getting extremely sideways out of the final corner. So he's dropping backwards in 16th place. Further forward, this is now what's going on for the last top 10 spot. This is Joseph Doble under threat from Richard Harwood in the Rising Sun liveried machine in 11th place. Just behind them is Lundy, and then now I think it's up behind them is now Herbert. That is now Lee Britton, in fact. So, or one of the two. In fact, there's one or two cars in there. No, so Lundy's in there. The car that's confusing me is John Pethick, because he's the one that came out of the pits, and he's the car with the blue car with the offset white stripe. And he came out of the pits at the end of lap number 1, whilst everyone else was filing past him. So he was caught up in some opening lap skirmishes. That has put him deep in the pack. So essentially, if he was in terms of pace, this is where he would be in the field, and about the boss with just outside the base of the top 10. But he's now having to pick himself through and just stay with the pack, and it's possibly confusing both Rowan Lundy and Luke Herbert just behind him in that group of cars. It's a great onboard shot here from Richard Harwood as you see them braking at the crest, and the road just falls away from you if you plunge downhill through the corkscrew under the bridge and in towards Rady Corner. It's quite a long corner which has a late apex on the inside line. 2 more corners. This corner used to be straight used to be a little bit longer. That corner a little bit tighter until they changed it at the end of 1995. But for a while it used to be that slightly tighter run, a shorter run towards the final corner too. Come out through the last corner, then just up through the gears again, where slipstream is going to be quite at a premium here down these straights. If you look towards the front of the field and looking at the gap, and that gap has now only gone out from what was about 4 tenths, it's been doubled to 8 tenths of a second. And I've worked it out that, given that Will Redford got pole position, that should give him a bonus point. If he gets the fastest lap, that'll be a bonus point as well. So you should get, if he wins, you get 102. And you get 100 points for a win, and it goes down in increments of 2. So you get 98 for second, 96 for third, so on and so forth. So that says to me, if you can take 4 points away from him, that should change the gap on what was, I believe, 11 points. I'll run myself with the gap here for a second. So coming through, it was 10 points. If he takes 4 points out of at least 6, which is what he needs to hope for, is then that Doble doesn't finish any higher than 3rd in the next 2 races, and he can go on to win the next 2. And that might be the only way he can try and steal this title away from Mike, who came into the evening with that 10-point advantage. So Will's doing everything he can, but unfortunately for him, so is Doble, and it's working out for him so far in 2nd place.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's very much down to Mikey to lose it himself. He does have a sizable lead that as long as he stays behind Will Redford. But like you said, if Will can he's got that bonus point for the pole sitter. If he gets that bonus point for the fastest lap and then obviously wins, the lead comes down to 6. And if he can do it again for the 2nd race, take that fastest lap, obviously won't get the pole sitter points, because obviously the grid for the 2nd race is a result of the 1st race. He can close it down, and if he can keep that up, then like you said, that there is an outside chance, but that's probably the best that he can hope for, is that outside chance, and maybe something happens to Mikey Doble. But touch wood and not commentating curse Mikey here, he has been Mr. Consistent throughout the seasons, always constantly in the top 3 of the points, if not just literally outside, not really being caught up in a lot of incidents that we've seen Will being caught up into. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think Will's just got to put it all on the line here. He's got to win all 3 races and then just hope some of the results goes his way to give him an outside fighting chance of the championship. But I mean, it's just amazing how much John Higgins Jr., as we can see him there just in the background, is off the pace here. 7 seconds and sort of in no man's land at the moment. So really struggling, and the front 2 at the moment with Redford and Doble really pulling away from the rest of the field, like pretty much we've seen the majority of this season.
Yeah, ironically, it's an easy thing to say, but if we didn't have Redwood or Doble in the field, then John Higgins Jr. would be the pace setter out of everyone else, and he would be the one that would have potentially about a 3.5 second lead over these two. This is the fight for fourth on screen between Will Blackwell Chambers and Tom Griffiths. Now, imagine these two will do plenty of this nose to tail running in this year's real MX-5 Super Cup, which gets underway in just a couple of weeks' time on March 18th and 19th at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit. But out through the final corner here at Laguna Seca onto another lap. We're coming on to roughly around about 3.5 minutes to go in this race as we come across the line. So now Redford's lead by 0.7 of a second from Doble in second place, a further 7 seconds back John Higgins Jr. Then this fight for fourth, as we still see Will Chambers now under attack from Tom Griffiths, who makes the big dive up the inside in towards the Andretti hairpin, and makes the move stick. So I think Blackwell Chambers didn't fight that too much. He seemed to just sit back and think, he might have got me here and got me sort of spooked on the inside line, but I'm going to sit back here in the draft in the next couple of corners. Might try and follow him here for another lap or two to see if he can get that position back, but he can't sit there and be patient for too long. He's got less than 3 minutes, so not that many more laps still to go. Rest of the top 10 is Andrew Tibbs in 6th position. Really good run from him, one of his first few esports races in 6th position. Recovering Matt Kendall after he had that spin and contact with Steve Roberts up at the corkscrew on the opening lap. He's in 7th. It's Keith Dalton, Pete Smith and Joseph Doble rounding out the top 10. The top 10 covered by 23 seconds at this point. But as Andrew Tibbs makes his way up the field, he's someone who seems to have adapted pretty quickly. I'm not sure how much more experience he's got in sims prior to this, but holding off someone who's been getting steadily quicker and quicker throughout the season, and on the recovery trail after that first lap incident, just about here at the top of the corkscrew.
Yeah, it definitely is pretty much starting where he had off, and he's just going down the inside here of Andrew Tibbs making the move. So a great recovery drive here from Matt, considering he was in P16 for the end of that first lap, got himself up to P6, so really a man on the charge. The fastest laps, sort of, he's up there with a 1:37.99, so well in the hint of sort of the fastest lap is Matt Kendall. But it's very interesting, and the two people that have made the biggest gain, and we're looking at him here, is Pete Smith. He's up 9 places from where he started in P8 at the moment, under a little bit of pressure from Dalton behind in the 711 car there as they come down into the Andretti hairpin, and very much closing off that inside line there was Pete Smith, but just slightly giving an opening there for Keith Dalton to make that opportunity, but unfortunately. So a great drive for Pete Smith, and I think he's relatively new, Scott. I don't remember seeing him in many of the races, so if this is his first outing, he's doing an exceptional job here in this first race. Only 1 minute left of this first race of 3 here tonight. Will Redford leads it, 0.7 of a second ahead of Mikey Doble. John Higgins Jr. now 9 seconds behind, but certainly the battle at the moment is you're watching here for P10, Richard Hardwood, Joseph Doble, Lee Britton there just on the back, on the fringes, and Luke Herbert in 13th overall. So a good battle on shooting. This is going to be close side by side there through turn number 6. Is always a treacherous, so this could be interesting here coming up to the corkscrew, literally like the arc side by side. As we see there, a little slight hit.
That was Luke Herbert. He was really sailing up to the back of all 3 cars pretty quickly, and I think going up towards the corkscrew, he kind of caught his braking off guard a little bit, and inadvertently, and I'm sure very accidentally, they just nudged one of his team members off the road, that being Lee Britton. So once again, Lee being the harbinger of some rather bad luck at the moment. He's not really getting the rub of the green in very many races in this esports series, and that's this type being another one. It's been tagged twice. And speaking of Luke, he might got a taste of his own medicine slightly by being nudged by Joseph Doble. So it just comes back onto the road. That was right in front of Richard Wooten. So I have to say that was a bit of a clumsy rejoin from Luke. He could have possibly looked a bit more to the left and seen him come back onto the road there, but Richard might feel a bit hard done by. That number 3 car might still be able to continue without too much damage. And he moves across, and right, I'm not sure if that was tit for tat or not, but either so, Richard Wooten's pushed his car. His car seemed to move in the direction of Luke Herbert, shall we say. There was contact, and off into the barriers went Richard Wooten. So, and now it's all getting a bit kicking off a little bit here, because you've got that's Lee Britton and Ryan Lundy in the mix, both getting around each other. So there's all sorts going on here outside the top 10, but they're all holding each other up, getting involved in shenanigans like this, which is not really how we want to see it. Now at the front of the field, meanwhile, we're on to the last lap of the race, and Will Redford is exactly where he needs to be to try and wrestle this esports series title away from Mikey Doble. Gap going into this race was 10 points. It looks as though it's going to go down by another 4, because he'll have picked up the pole position point. I think possibly the fastest lap point. We'll check the stats after the race as well. But he'll at least get 100 points for the race victories. He heads up towards the checkered flag. It's Will Redford, who is on good form at the start of this final evening of racing. Redford takes race number 1 at Laguna Seca in fine fashion, but he was chased all the way to the flag by Mikey Doble, who has seen his points lead drop down by at least 2 or 3 points to try and work hard to keep that as tight as possible. It's third for John Higgins Jr., a sprint to the line between Blackwood Chambers and Griffiths, who dance out at the last minute but loses out by 0.5 of a second at the checkered flag. More sprints to the line. This is Pete Smith and Keith Dalton. Dalton on the right, Smith on the left. It's almost a dead heat, and Smith got it on the line in the black and yellow car, the yellow flames on the front. By 8/1000ths of a second, he stole 8th position. Great drive to the flag. Also credits have to go to the recovering Matt Kendall, who picked up P6. Andrew Tibbs picked up 7th in one of his first 3 esports races. Really good stuff from him. Dalton got 9th. And Richard Harwood, after all that was going on for P10 backwards, takes that final top 10 spot, followed by Doble, Selden, Etheridge, Lundy, Britton, Herbert after his contact, Roberts after his spin, Aidan Edgar, Bob Bannister, Harry England, and then John Pethick, who did take the checkered flag. Richard Wootton we saw out of the race. Patrick Fletcher was down a lap but got back out after his first lap incident. We lost James Riley at the start of the race too. He got caught up as well. So Redford then takes a few more points out of Mikey Doble, and it's going to be quite intriguing to see how the rest of that connotation plays out as the evening goes on. Race 2 grid's going to be set by the results of race number 1, so wherever you finished in that first race is where you start for race number 2. This is how it's going to line up. So Will Redford then does start on pole position. Mikey Doble alongside in 2nd. John Higgins Jr. and Will Blackwood Chambers 3rd and 4th. Tom Griffins is 5th from Matt Kendall in 6th. Andrew Tibbs is 7th. Keith Dalton starts 8th. And Richard Harwood and Joseph Doble rounding out the top 10. And Tom Selden and Chris Etheridge completes the top 12. Lee Britton and Steve Roberts complete row 7 from Aidan Edgar and Rob Bannister. Then it's Pete Smith and Harry England. And Rowan Lundy and Luke Herbert. Then Richard Wootton, John Pethick, Patrick Fletcher and James Riley completes the 24-car grid, getting underway for race number 2 very shortly. So initially, advantage Redford, but he's still got a lot of work to do, and I think it's safe to say that, well, we'll find out in a second how this is going to play out, because race number 2 is about to get underway. So right in the bag, can Redford make it 2 from 2? Let's find out if he can do it in race number 2, as we're underway at Laguna Seca for the 2nd time, and it's pretty much as it was from race number 1. Redford from pole, leads, and it's Doble who slots into 2nd place just behind them. Higgins Jr. for 3rd with Will Blackwood Chambers to his outside. They pile down towards the Andretti hairpin at turn 2 for the first time, and Blackwood Chambers has got the grip on the outside line. Can't quite stay there to get past for 3rd. He goes over the grass a little bit. There's a couple of cars spinning in the background. Another car spinning. That's Luke Herbert's got involved again. 3 not been his evening so far. There's more contact. Round goes Harwood, round goes Etheridge. Come on, boys. This is child's play. Come on. Etheridge is in, Harry England involved in that as well. Also, I think it's possibly James Riley. Pete Smith is involved in that too. I think it was Aidan Edgar who went straight to the back of Pete Smith, and I was hoping to be a cleaner start, but I hate to use the phrase, but I think you can tell it's end of term with this series, can't you?
You certainly can. Lots of shenanigans there in the start of this 2nd race. I was just looking back at the fastest lap for the first race, and would you believe it? Will Redford and Mikey Doble got exactly the same time of 136.85. So Mikey Doble managing to stop Will Redford getting that 4-point advantage in that first race. So probably down to the 3 points there. But I mean, it's just exceptional how those two guys are managing to keep the pace that they're doing, and Mikey Doble just trying to limit the advantage of Will Redford. But I think, you know, as we've seen in previous rounds, this race number 3 coming up, so it's the top 10 that are going to be inverted, and that's really what causes a lot of issues for certainly Will Redford in previous races to try and get back up through the field. So that's really where it's going to be. But I think if it stays as it is at the moment, as it was in the first race, Will be in 10th, and obviously Mikey Doble will be in 9th. Will's really got to be aggressive, like we saw out at Knock Hill in the 3rd race, that Will really got to the front of the first. He's going to have to put it all on the line for this 3rd race, but still very early on in this 2nd race, so still anything could happen. Just hypothesizing over the previous rounds and what might be going through Will's head if it ends up being the same. But certainly a bit of a poor start here for the second round. We can see there 5 drivers in the pit lane: Smith, Perfect, Heffridge, England and Fletcher as in the win. So 5 cars currently in the pits after this very first lap, and quite a few of the drivers are down. But James Riley is our biggest gainer on the field after the opening lap, up 11 places to P13th at the moment. So very much kept himself out of trouble on that opening lap and gained a lot of places. So just off that reverse, getting into that reverse grid pole, who's currently being head by, and to be fair, Scott, I hope he does actually get his Lee Britton. The guy has not been able to buy any luck. Oh, as we see another car going off a corkscrew. That was Joseph Doble there, very much getting it wrong at the corkscrew. I'm not sure if he got a little bit of a tag to get pushed out, but it's him at the moment. And Lee Britton managing to get up to 9th.
And that was Joseph Doble arriving sideways across the front of Lee Britton's car. He was lucky not to get collected, so that would be a piece of good fortune for Lee so far. In the second lap now as we come across the line, so it's Will Redford who leads now. The gap is much tighter than it was towards the end of race number 1. It's only about a quarter of a second, so it's looking pretty close between these two. Now we've had a slight update to the live standings, I think, that Will Blackwell Chambers has taken care of, or one of the admin team has done. So just to confirm where we sit now, I think it's before we take into account exactly working out A, who gets the fastest lap point, and B, also the allocation of a pole position point. I say that because looking at who scored what, I only say that who scored what because in terms of other ones that were allocated, I said that because there was 102 points that was allocated for somebody at for Will Redford at Alton Park, and that was I'm sure for pole position for that first race. But we'll work those out as we go along. I might have to have a quick word with Will Blackwell Chambers, who is, I think, mainly overseeing these points afterwards. But at the very least, for race results, Will Redford has 100 points. It's 98 for Mikey Doble, who scored for second, and John Higgins Jr. for third. That's brought the gap down at least down 2 points to 8 between 1282 for Doble, 1274 Redford. So it's getting closer towards them, but ultimately, again, we need to see if Redford can pull away and even also take away a fastest lap point and keep it this time. They head their way through out of the rainy corner. This is the battle we've got here for 3rd, 4th and 5th. The last step on the podium between Griffiths, Blackwell Chambers and Kendall. But even then, those guys are already at the end of number 3, some 3 seconds or so behind the top 2, who are just absolutely in that class of their own. Come out of the final hairpin here. Now John Higgins Jr., after his slight off up at turn 6, is recovering from that quickly enough, and he's on the back of these 3-car battle pretty quickly. We're seeing here Blackwell Chambers to the right of Griffiths here, and Kendall might try and force his way down the inside of both of them. Prime view here as we come up to the double apex left-hander of Andretti hairpin, and the wide line for Will Blackwell Chambers didn't quite work for him in the first instance because he lost out to Kendall very momentarily, but then on the next corner for turn 3, now Blackwell Chambers to stay on the inside line and pick up that position once again. So as they come up through now turn 4, now this very short curved section before they go underneath the Mother's Bridge, and under brakes now for this corner here. We've got to try and give as much momentum as possible all the way through this left-hander to start the climb up the hill towards the peak of the hill at the corkscrew. We'll see here if Kendall's got anything left in reserve here. John Higgins Jr. only about 3/10 behind. And the rest of the pack is Tibbs in 7th, Dalton 8th, Lee Britton 9th. If it stays as it is, E10 at the moment goes to that man Steve Roberts. Imagine if he got the reverse grid pole. Well, it would have been, unless Keith Dalton stays there. He's now dropped to 10th. Roberts is up to 9th now, only about a couple of tenths away from Britton ahead of him. And that is, talk about curse the commentator. Steve Roberts is involved. The other car that was involved, that was Keith Dalton. So I think that's Keith, we can shut up or not, but both Keith Dalton and Steve Roberts have hit strife. And once again, Steve Roberts can't seem to get a proper break in this series, can he?
No, he certainly can't. Like you said, he's always up the front end of the grid for that first race, but then unfortunately either getting hit or making slight mistakes himself, always finds himself towards the back. Let's have a look at the replay here of what happened to Steve. So coming up to the treacherous turn number 6, did he take it a little bit wide and sort of lose it? Oh no, it's the car coming across, and unfortunately again getting his back end sideswiped off a car, getting it slightly wrong, which is always one of the aspects of this track, that treacherous treacherous turn number 6. You've really got to dip it into the corner, but there's a real treacherous sausage curb on the inside, and if you hit any sort of wheel on that, it throws you across the track there that we saw from Keith Dalton, and unfortunately his re-entry onto the track, which is unfortunate for him because he would have been sort of like an innocent bystander. There's not a lot you can do with a new tyre model setup in iRacing, and literally just came across and hit the back end of Roberts. So again, no luck here out for Roberts, but joining the battle here for that P3, we've got Tom Griffiths in third. We got Will Blackwell Chambers really putting it all on the edge. I've been watching him the past couple of laps, and he's literally using all of the track possible to make any sort of advantage is Will at the moment, but really putting Tom Griffiths under a lot of pressure. Matt Kendall has had a great recovery drive from where we saw him in that first lap out in the first race where he's down into P16th, has managed to get him up onto P5. Got a really good opportunity here for P3, all getting his tyre slightly onto the dirty stuff, managing to keep it, but himself and John Higgins Jr. in this second race has sort of almost fallen away on the back end of this quad that we're seeing. As we see him try to make a move on the inside of the final curb, just slightly hitting into the back end of Mike Kendall. Luckily, no damage was done by the looks of it, and able to fight another day. These MX-5s can take a little bit of punishment and a little bit of door rubbing, but these 4 cars locked to get that last place on the podium. Will Blackwell Chambers has managed to get past Tom Griffiths here on that lap, so he heads out this 4-car battle for that last place on the podium. But the front 2 again, Scott, have managed to just scamper away. Will Redford just getting up to his round about half a second lead over Mikey Doble, but at the moment these two very much locked together by what seems an umbilical cord.
Pretty close as well. But James looks like he went wide exit in turn 4, which means that he's now under threat once again from Griffiths. Matt Kennedy senses possibly just biding his time here, although he was getting a little bit in, but he did get rudely shoved in the rear by John Higgins Jr. up at the final corner just at the end of the lap we've just completed. Now as they come up through turn 6 and now start the climb, continue the climb upwards towards crest and up towards the top of the corkscrew. It's a bit of a crest you have to brake on in a straight line to get this car stopped all the way to the right run, and James looking a little nervous as he came towards the apex and turned his way through. A lot of dust and dirt that's been kicked up as the car's been using all the road, and a bit of runoff here. And look at Kendall going to stick his nose up the inside in towards Rainy Corner. That sort of double apex left-handed. It's got a late second apex as you go through. Higgins Jr. fancies a look as he comes up through the right-hander now towards the final corner. And another lap, and they're all moving all over each other as Higgins Jr. has another look up the inside, and this time he avoids contact, but he forces Kendall to run wide over the AstroTurf on the exit. He's going to put himself level as they come up towards the pit straight. This is over 5th position. They watch Will Chambers and Griffiths in front, scrap over the final podium place. Kendall will give as good as he's got as he goes up through turn 1. This very fast left-handed kink. Meanwhile, Griffiths going for 3rd up the inside of Blackwell Chambers. He's done this before. Just almost nibbles the rear end of Blackwell Chambers' car. Meanwhile, John Higgins Jr. does complete the move on Kendall. Looking back to the rest of the top 10, it's still, as we continue to watch this, it's still Lee Britton 7th, Andrew Tibbs in 8th, and then Joseph Doble 9th, and Rowan Lundy's the man that will start on the reverse grid pole if he stays where he is. And that will be quite a sensation for him. He'll have Joseph Doble alongside him, and I suspect that if Joseph Doble's there in 9th, it's the second on the grid. The fact that obviously he'll be starting ahead of both Will Redford and Mikey Doble, depending on what happens in the next roughly 4 minutes or so, if things stay as they are. Can't help but feel that Joseph Doble, if there hasn't been at least a conversation between Mikey and Joseph to say, look, in this reverse grid, if you're ahead of me, I want to just try and back him up a little bit and try and force him to lose a couple more points. I'd be surprised if that conversation hasn't happened at least once between those two, because let's face it, they're teammates, they're brothers, they're siblings. They're going to want to try and help out each other, particularly Joseph, if he can try and make life a bit more difficult for Will in that 3rd race if he can.
100%. I mean, it would be remiss of us to actually think that they wouldn't be chatting in that possibility, and this at the moment is probably going into Mikey's hands, like he said, with his brother in at the back and of the opportunity to be that 2nd place on the grid for this 3rd race. But Robert Lundy at the moment, like you said, you know, that great position P10th, and he's got a bit of a gap between himself and Luke Herbert behind him in P11th. So as long as he can keep it nice and clean, keep the momentum going, you know, that reverse grid could be himself, or we can see on the timing tower the battle between himself and Joseph Doble for that P9, so he could have an opportunity to get even more points. But I think for obviously the final race of the season, I think Robert Runnerwood would want to be on that pole position, so it'd be interesting to see what happens. But continue watching this battle for the final step on the podium. Will Blackwood Chambers, Tom Griffiths there in third. The gap has closed up now between himself, John Higgins Jr. Matt Kendall might feel a little bit aggrieved because that's almost two laps in a row previously before John got that passing move done, was that John Higgins sort of lunged into that last corner, and we saw that passing move there that John Higgins made, where Mike probably went out a little bit wide, seeing that John Higgins was almost trying to dive again up his inside, but trying to give back as he nearly goes into the back there of Tom Griffiths coming down into the corkscrew. Really treacherous one, certainly in this close pack racing, to try and find that braking markers, because like we said, it's very much a blind crest coming up to the corkscrew, so these four cars sort of locked in an epic battle for the last place on the podium.
That was a beautiful double pass that happened in synchronicity. That was John Higgins Jr. getting past Kendall. It was Griffiths getting past Blackwood Chambers, and they're going to go 2 by 2, exiting the final corner. A little twitch of oversteer from Blackwood Chambers as he got back onto the throttle, and it now gives Higgins Jr. the proper opportunity to carry the momentum around the outside to take one position. If he's got enough confidence here to go down the outside to get past Griffiths, he might go again as Blackwood Chambers thinks this form of defensive attack. He thought about getting past Griffiths. Thankfully, gets the car anchored up and repasses John Higgins Jr. and stays ahead of him. They come back towards turn 3. On the right hand they go. Still as close as it ever was as we continue to watch this between Redford and Doble. Still 4 tenths between them, but this third place battle is the one we can't really take our eyes off too much. We're close to the end of the race here, just over a minute left to go. Kendall there just has a think. He puts himself into John Higgins Jr.'s mirrors, which might be a good opportunity to distract him on the run, but up towards the corkscrew, particularly into the braking zone. If you're moving around and the driver looks into his mirror and sees a full-on Mazda MX-5 swarming around left and right in the rearview mirror, you tend not to look at the road in front. That means you can miss your braking point, you can miss your turning point, and therefore run wide and compromise your line as we come back through the corkscrew again. It's an incredible sequence of corners, particularly from on board on this Mazda MX-5 as they're turning through left-hander. We're going to get one more time around the Laguna Seca circuit for this second race, because the timer still has 30 seconds to go and the leaders are only about 7 or 10 seconds up the road anyway, so they'll be taking the last corner if they haven't already, but they have, down towards the start and finish line. So this is on to the last lap of the race. So one of these 4 cars will end up on the podium. The question has to be which one's it going to be and in which order will they finish. There's a back marker in the way, which I think is Patrick Fletcher. It is, because he's the last car that's still running that's not in the pit lane. That one's Steve Roberts after his early exit. It's Kendall here, has got the run on John Higgins Jr. up the inside into the Andretti hairpin, clips the first apex nicely and parks it straight on the second, and then gets a rude shove in the back from John Higgins Jr. saying that you can park it on the apex where you want, but come on, get on with it. We're going to try and get past Griffith and Blackwood Chambers and try and get a podium place.
Yeah, Kendall really made that pay coming out of that last corner. You saw there John Higgins Jr. going super defensive into that last corner. Matt Kendall taking it super wide, getting the faster exit on that speed, and really got that position secured on that exit speed of the last corner. And then we had the drag race up to the Andretti turn number 2, and was able to make the move stick. So that's how far back, and that's how much you've got to really keep the momentum in these little MX-5s. Momentum is key in this, and that was a prime example of we just saw there John Higgins Jr. going super defensive, but then obviously getting that overspeed as we see Higgins just trying to come back here, coming around the outside down the corkscrew side by side, and literally trying to barge his way through here. Matt Kendall on the inside should still loses the traction out on track, and yeah, a bit of an unorthodox pass, but back at the front we do have Will Redford, who has managed to make it 2 from 2, so giving the best opportunity for himself, but his arch nemesis there, Mikey Doble, in second place. Just like a praying mantis, just watching what Will Redford does, but looking back at this battle for third. Tom Griffiths manages to secure that third place. Will Blackwood Chambers getting 4th. John Higgins Jr. managed to just keep in front of Matt Kendall for 6th. Lee Britton in 7th, so a great finish for him. Andrew Tibbs coming down. Is he going to take that 8th place? Yes, he is. Joseph Doble in ninth, and Ronan Lundy is best probably positioned here, and obviously our pole sitter for race number 3.
Yeah, so Ryan Lundy then will pick up the reverse grid pole, but crucially, it's for Will Redford. It's more points he takes away from Mikey Doble. Only 2, it looks like, which means that should only bring the gap down at the very least by another 2 points. Always we see some more, even more shenanigans going on right towards the end of that race, and that was between James Riley and Tom Selden at the last corner. So that was not quite called for, I don't think, between those two. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but that's I'm sure something that we looked after afterwards as the car arrives. That's Richard Wood, who's had his own dramas throughout the race as he picks his way back up the order and towards the line. He will beat them both to the checker flag. In fact, sprints on the line, he picks up 2 late places on the run to the finish line. He got 15th position as a whole of that one. So that will be at least another 2 points taken out. Do we know who took the fastest lap of the race in that second race?
Just looking at it, yes, it was Will Redford with a 136.80. Second was Mikey Doble with 136.86.
Right, so that means that I think that should be another. Yeah, we can see now there's some more fastest lap points being put in. So again, not sure if there was a point given for pole. Fastest lap points are being put in here, and the fastest lap point, maybe because it was set by him first, has been given to Will Redford in that first race. So we see it's 3 points taken Mikey Doble in that first race, 3 for second, which means now that's 6 points taken from the 10 points he had going into that race, which means looking on those drop scores, although I think possibly the drops, yeah, which means now there is literally 4 points in it now between the top 2, which means Will Redford needs to, if he can, needs to outscore Mikey Doble by at least 4 points, because then we have to start playing the game of count back on race victories. Let's look at the result for race number 2 before we do that. We've got a bit of time in between races 2 and 3 to set the grid. So Will Redford then takes the victory by 0.4 of a second, so a closer winning margin this time at the front. Tom Griffiths is in 3rd, from Will Blackwell Chambers 4th, and it's John Higgins Jr. 5th, Matt Kendall 6th, E. Britton 7th, Andrew Tibbs 8th, still impressive for one of his first evenings in the esports series. Joseph Doble 9th, and he will crucially start on the front row of the grid alongside reverse pole sitter Rowan Lundy. What role can he play in trying to help Mikey Doble stay atop of the points and take the esports series? 11th for Keith Dalton, ahead of Richard Harwood in 12th place. Luke Herbert was another driver with more eventful antics in this weekend so far. He finished 13th. Then it's Aidan Edgar, Richard Wootton, James Riley and Tom Selden after their last lap collision. And it's Pete Smith in 18th place, John Pethick, Rob Bannister, Harry England, Chris Etheridge, Patrick Fletcher's had a tough evening, but he's finished 3 laps down. And Steve Roberts, who I think retired midway through after he's had, again, good pace, but just not being able to really make the most of it. So I'm just seeing the points are being reset, at least from the front runners. I can see just Will's doing his thing to reset some of the points here. There's a particular battle going on also. I think he's just calculating what's going on for 4th and 5th in the points. And I'll give you some news on that in a second. So it looks as though, looking at the results here, that out of the 10-point lead, Will Redford has recovered 6 points from the 10 that he needs to try and gain back at least. Now, in terms of count back for victory, let's try and work this out. So Will Redford had 4. I'm going to do this actively here. He got the hat-trick at Alton Park, 1 race win at Silverstone, which brings him to 4. And then he won his next race after that, and the 2 races at Brands Hatch, that's 6. 8. So if he wins this race coming up, that'll be 9 race wins for him for the season. Compare that to Mikey Doble, who's had a win at 2 wins at Silverstone, 2 wins at Donington Park, which takes him to 4. Wait for this order to reset itself quickly, which we go. Yeah, so Mikey's still leading there by 4. So it's now Silverstone, 2 at Silverstone, 2 at Donington, 2 at Knock Hill, and 2 at Brands Hatch. So ironically, we're actually, I think, tied on race wins between each other. So even if somehow Mikey Doble was only able to pick up, let's say, well, if he only got 4 points, or if he outscored, if both of these drivers did not win this next race, and Redford did outscore Doble by at least by 4 points, that would put them equal on points by the looks of it on drop scores. Depending on drop score things depend. If they finish 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or 5th, wherever, their worst highest result is actually it's 84 points twice for Will Redford, and it's 92 for Mikey Doble, so there could be a difference in there. Essentially, Will Redford has to do everything he can to try and outscore Mikey Doble by at least 4 points. If he can win this race, even if they ended up on equal points, is what I'm trying to say, then Redford would still win because he would have one more win than Doble, because they're both on 8 victories at this point going into this final race of the, not just of the evening, but of the entire season. So ultimately Redford needs to try and win this race, and he needs to try and hope that Redford essentially finishes 3rd or lower, and that'll be regardless if he gets the fastest lap or not. I think if Redford gets the fastest lap of the race and wins, that's another 4 points taken out, and that will mean. Well, no, actually, that might work out in his favour. Actually,
It's all the permutations, isn't it? It's mental, but I mean, it's all coming down to this last race, Scott, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be interesting to sit on the shoulders or be in the minds of what Will Redford and Mikey Doble are going to do in this 3rd race, the unpredictable 3rd race as well, where both of the drivers are going to be 9th and 10th on the grid. So they've got to deal with that mid-pack battle, and it's how they're going to approach. We've seen in the past both of the drivers being quite conservative at the start of these races, but I don't think Will has got the opportunity to do that. So are we going to see another not kill 3rd race from Will Redford where he just goes for it, he puts it all on the line? Because pretty much looking at the permutations is another 4 points is needed. Now we've seen that Will Redford has been super quick and won the first 2 fastest laps in the opening race, so you know, history will tell you that he's probably got a good opportunity to try to do that again. So as long as Mikey Doble is 1 place behind Will Redford, he will win the championship. If there's a car in between himself and Will Redford, that's where all the permutations will be open, and it's going to be epic this 3rd race.
I think what will also make it trickier is that if neither of them win this race, but Redford still outscores, but they find themselves equal on points, I think it would still go to Doble on count back, not just of wins, because they'd be equal, but then it will go and count back of 2nd places, of which Mikey Doble has substantially more than Will Redford does. In fact, I think Will's only taken, I think, was it 1 2nd place all season, and that was literally at the 1st race at Brands Hatch. So there's several 2nd places out there for Mikey Doble, and that was certainly with him. Right, let's settle it then. It's either going to be Doble or Redford at the front, but we'll see how it works out in the next 15 minutes. It's Lundy on pole, Doble on the front row for Joseph Doble in 2nd. Might be a slight jump start there, I think, for Ryan Lundy as they get away from the line. Lundy leads, but he might get a time penalty possibly, I think, because it looked like he jumped a bit too quickly, unless everyone else was still asleep. Down through turn 1 up towards the Andretti hairpin for the first time. We've got to keep an eye on both, of course. Mikey Doble and Will Redford, who are there in the bottom of the top 10 already. Joseph Doble spinning already. That's not going to help in the middle of the pack. Oh, and of all people that tags him, it's Will Redford yet again in the 3rd race. He cannot get a break. All the people he tags in that race, and I'm certain there'll be some certain people that are thinking the obvious, I'm sure, but not about how actually saying it. Of all the people that either that spins in that sequence, it's Joseph Doble. Of all the people that tags him, it's Will Redford. And just like that, once again, after it was all an upward trajectory, once again, it is another cliff he's fallen off. It's Doble's advantage yet again on the start of this 1st lap. Can you believe it?
Just no. I mean, we wanted that Grand Slam finish. If it ends like this, it's just so unfortunate for Will Redford, as we're watching a few incidents further back the field, looking up through Andrew Tibbs through turn number 6, got that completely wrong, got it right out wide, so just need to watch his rejoin here. Hopefully the car is steering in a straight line. It very much looked like it is, but wow, I mean, let's have a look at this replay on board for Will Redford. So coming down, trying to keep it nice and clean on the outside here of Andretti corner. Can you see the incident from it? He just had nowhere to go there, unfortunately, did Will. And like you said, I do not think that the brothers actually talked about that. The Doble brothers thought, yeah, let's spin it around Andretti and get in front of him. That was just an unlucky, but, I mean, you just can't. Just such bad luck for Will, and it's unfortunate. We will see him get back up. He's currently in P9 at the moment. Mikey Doble is up in P4, managing to keep it clean yet again, and I think that's been the Achilles heels of Will Redford. He'll probably kick himself when he comes in the interview room, is that, you know, he just can't seem to buy a decent bit of good luck in these 3rd races.
Well, I think a saving grace for him at the moment is, I think, maybe 2 things. One, he pretty much hit it was completely side on to nose was the contact between Seth Job. It was quite a relatively hefty whack that he took, and he might get a bit of benefit here from Keith Dalton running wide, and Luke Herbert in front of him. So that might have minimised any damage, if any he's taken, if at all he's taken any damage. The second thing is it's happened on the first corner, the second corner of the first lap when everyone's still quite closely bunched together, and Mikey Doble is still only up in 4th place. Redford is now up to 8th past Luke Herbert, so he's not that far away. He's 3.4 seconds off the lead, and he's been quick all night in qualifying and in both of the races. He's had the lap time measure only just about from Mikey Doble, so he needs to really try and pick his way past all of these cars in front of him as much as quickly as he can. He's got 7 cars to pass if he can in the next 12 minutes. It'll be quite the task, but we've seen Will do this before, climb his way back through the order. I think if anyone can do it, it certainly will be Will Redford if he can possibly manage it. Of all the people leading, of course, if we say of all the people, it's Lee Britton who's got the advantage here. He leads from John Higgins Jr. in 2nd place. Crucially, though, Mikey Doble is up to 3rd now. He's 1.2 seconds off the lead as they come onto the straight for the 2nd time. Redford's still there in that leading group quite far. He's past Keith Dalton. That's up to 7th. He's gone past him now. So Britton leads it, Higgins in 2nd, Doble 3rd, Griffiths 4th, then it's Kendall, Blackwell, Chambers, and then there's a small gap to Will Redford. He's got a second and a half to make up. But what will be beneficial here is, one, if Doble's stuck in this group, he can't get any higher than 3rd place for the time being. And the other part is, if they're all fighting amongst each other, the easiest going to be for him to start to close up. He's doing so already. He came across the line 3 seconds back. He's already made up, I think, quite literally, what's the gap now? It's now about 3 tenths already. So he's made up a couple of tenths in his first part of this lap itself. It looks though, I think here, that Mikey Doble's not having the easiest time getting past both either John Higgins Jr. or Lee Britton here. He's stuck in 3rd place whilst these two are nose to tail. He's got the very feisty Tom Griffiths behind him. Now as Doble tries to force the issue, does he want to take this risk in towards turn 6? He might think he wants to. He can't afford getting contact like that. He tags the back of John Higgins Jr., who gets sideways exiting turn 6. He backs off, and here goes Tom Griffiths. Griffiths gets past both of them, so does Matt Kendall, and immediately we thought the one championship contender was getting involved in strife. Mikey Doble almost comes to blows again, loses 2 spots, and who's right behind him now? He's just past Will Blackwood Chambers? Will Redford. Now, it gets very interesting with a third of the race to go. Redford has got Doble back in his sights. This series fight for the title ain't over by a long shot.
No way, and that was a really unorthodox trying to overtake there from Mikey Doble to try and get that through turn number 6. He must know that going side by side for that is always going to ask for trouble, and nearly came a cropper. Managed to keep it both cars as well. Redford is over the back. Mikey Doble just trying to get the move done. Mike just going super defensive here, coming down through turn number 1 into the Andretti curve. It's a battle between the two. Will Redford is trying everything he can, but I mean, Mikey Doble almost gifted there the championship over to Will Redford. Managed to save it coming out of turn number 6. I mean, that's a great bit of skill to be able to keep that car, because literally the car in front of him nearly came across him as well. So pretty much an unorthodox error there for Mikey Doble to try and make that passing move through turn number 6. But again, this is game on, like you said. We can watch it on board with Will Redford as we look at Mikey Doble just in front of him, and this could be paying into Will Redford's car, because these are not fighting over 1st and 2nd. This is 4th and 5th. So if Will can't get past Mikey Doble, he has got cars in front of him to chase, and like I said, if he can get that fastest lap and then basically keep a car in between him and Mikey Doble, there's every opportunity he could still win this championship. So Mikey Doble very much dicing with a little bit of death here in this final race, maybe trying to give all the viewers an awesome grandstand finish to what has been an epic series in these MX-5 cars.
I think we're all enjoying it. I can't say the same for Will Redford. I don't think he's probably his heart in his mouth at this point in time. He's got the 4 cars in front of him, which I'm pretty certain he knows if he can pass all 4, and as you rightly said, can keep at least 1 car between himself and Mikey Doble, he can somehow recover this esports title. And Mikey Doble diving up the inside, taking a place from him. It's not going to quite help in terms of Doble's points, but it will help him get the momentum and the sprint down the pit straight up towards turn 1, and then the Andretti hairpin to try and pick up 4th position if he can. He's in the tow. He's watching Mikey Doble hold the inside line. Kendall might go diving back down the outside. He's confident to do so. And Redford also has to try and go with him because he knows he has to. He's got no choice if he can try and get past. Tries to force the issue, squeezing up the inside if he can. He'll have the outside line for turn 3. Meanwhile, just in front of him, whilst we watch for that, we're looking at 2 battles here consecutively. We've got Will Redford trying to get past Kendall, who's being almost a bit held up here. He's got the undercut on the exit turn 3. Surely has to be up the inside for turn 4 this time. Gets under brakes, turns to the right-hander, through he goes. That's up to P4 now. Meanwhile, Doble all over the back of Tom Griffiths. This would be for second place if he can get past. He himself has been chasing Lee Britton. Down the inside to turn 5 goes Mikey Doble, and he goes to second place. One more car stands between him and race victory, but it's now 3 cars at the moment that stands between Redford and getting to the lead. He has to hope that if he can get the fastest lap, that Doble does finish higher than third. It is tension all the way. We've only just gone past half distance. I think it could still be either of those guys. John Higgins Jr. is out wide on the gravel. He gets passed by Will Blackwell Chambers down to 7th position. Here goes Mikey Noble with that big dive up the inside of the corkscrew around the outside. There's contact inside. Off into the barriers. That's it. Redford's off into the barriers. And I think that could be, unfortunately, his Winter Esports Series chances gone in an instant. He's gone back to the pits. That's it. Game over. It's done. So he gets the checkered flag. I think if he does get going again, Redford, I think, has got out in absolute frustration. And if Doble keeps on as he is, he will be the first ever BRSCC Winter Esports Series champion. But I'm certain maybe not the way he wants it to happen. And Will Redford must be absolutely off the rev limiter with that. I'm not sure if it was possibly a racing incident or not. Let's take a look at it. Down towards the corkscrew. He makes the big dive up the inside towards the inside of Tom Griffiths, tries to move across. I don't think he realised that Tom Griffiths was still there on the inside. And I hate to say it on that one, Andy, I think Will Redford, unfortunately, while he might not want to hear it, has every bit of that to blame himself, because he going up the inside and looked to me as if he simply squeezed Tom Griffiths, and Tom had absolutely nowhere to go on the racing line.
Yeah, 100%. I think Will just trying to close off the door. Unfortunately, Tom had nowhere to go and then clipped the back end of the car. But, you know, I was just looking at this race. Mikey Doble was taking some extraordinary risks at the start of the race, and we've seen some extraordinary passes. And then we had Will trying to do exactly the same. So they were both putting it on the line to try and win this race. And unfortunately, Will just came off slightly the worst there. We just saw a couple of laps earlier, Mikey Doble nearly getting it wrong through turn number 6 as we're just watching him coming up Lorena straight here, coming into the corkscrew again. But Will just can't buy some luck in this third race, and unfortunately, like you said, it's sort of writing on the wall at the moment. Mikey Doble, I'm not sure if he knows that he doesn't really need to be pushing quite as hard as he nearly comes a cropper there, and he manages to keep second place. He really does not probably know that Will is out of this race and taking real crazy risks at the moment, like he's currently doing. But he probably wants to go out in style here and win this last race. But Mikey Doble is not sitting on his laurels here and really wants this race win of Lee Britton for the final race of this season. As we watch on the final lap, Richard Harwood getting involved there with quite who that pit Fletcher it was there, getting involved with on the last corner. But wow, I mean, both of the championship contenders here, you can't say they haven't put everything on the line in this third race.
No, he's putting it all on the line as well. Has to be Lee Britton, because he's holding back the tide, including the points leader. He's done so over the last few minutes. He really is putting up a fantastic battle. I don't want to put the commentator's curse on him at all, so I apologise if I'm about to. But imagine if Lee Britton, through all of his different frustrations, all of his different levels of fortune, if he can round off the season with a win here in the final race of the season. But Mikey Doble was trying everything. Now, he might have seen on his relative on his screen somewhere that Mikey's hasn't managed to got through, so that Will hasn't has disappeared from the top 10 and he's basically out of it. Now, he has done a fast repair. You can see on the left hand on the timing screen at the bottom of 21st, but has got back out again. And certainly he must be a lap down or so from that fast repair, because although he's showing he's down by 1 minute and 6, so perhaps not, but who knows? I'm certain he's at least a lap down, so I don't think he's completely out of it. He might be trying to rely on some kind of a drop score in case a Doble hits Strife, and given how close and how risk-taking he's been so far at this point, he may well have to benefit on that if all else fails. But Doble again, he finds himself trying to get past, looking left and right, and here comes Tom Griffiths diving down the outside, absolutely sells him a dummy down at the outside line at the hairpin. He's got the run, he'll get the toe from Lee Britton, he'll get second place, with Doble trying to fight him back all the way towards turn 1 of the Andretti hairpin. Henley's 4th, John Higgins Jr. is 5th, and Blackwell Chambers is 6th. It is 6th for the lead and podium places as Doble, what's happened to Doble? I think it's a slowdown, it must be a slowdown penalty, because Doble's dropped to 6th. That must be the only reason, apart from missing a gear, which I don't think it was, because these cars are sequential, I think. It has to be a slowdown penalty. So Mikey Doble then has dropped from what was 2nd to 6th. If he wants to get himself back up the order, he has to do it all over again, unless he realises that it's extreme thought here, but he thinks, look, I don't need to be in this fight. 6th at the moment is enough for me to get it done. Let's simply sit here, get the race result done, and just go take the points. But I suspect possibly that but that was more a slowdown penalty for cutting the corner or running wide somewhere other than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, to be perfectly honest, Scott, I think that slowdown penalty has probably saved Mikey Doble, because he was in the thick of it. You know, he was taking probably undue risks in the championship standard to try and get the first place. So being back in 6th place, as you can see there, just dropping off the back of Blackwell Chambers, is probably giving him the championship, because he was he was just doing crazy risks, considering Will Redford is completely out of the championship, and the championship is his. All he needs to do is finish the race. Doesn't matter what position he finishes in, his championship is his. But being that where he was just taking risks, taking passing opportunities where you think you wouldn't. What are you doing that for, you crazy man? You know, that slowdown has perfectly saved him, I believe, to be able to win this championship.
But it's changed at the front though. Lee Britton's made the mistake, and now it's all 4 of the cars that were chasing him. Everyone's sailing by. Now it's side by side, almost 3 wide as John Higgins Jr. tries to push the gap between Kendall to his right and Givers to his left. Will Blackwood Chambers must be laughing to himself watching this all happen in front of him. Down towards the hairpin, 2 deep into the corner. Griffiths clatters into the side of Kendall. Kendall now might lose out to 2nd place for John Higgins Jr. Lee Britton's back to 5th now behind Blackwood Chambers. Back up the inside to hold 2nd place goes Matt Kendall. Blackwood Chambers sticks his nose up the inside and thinks, I want a podium for my final race in season 2. Let's see if I can make this happen. It really is all kicking off. I think we're on pretty much, the last lap is won. About just over a minute to go, so I expect this is the last lap one. They're going to get one more time around by the looks of it. Now, 6th position is still Mikey Doble. 7th place is Luke Herbert. So Luke Herbert's really found a bit of turn of pace, and he's the car right at the back of the queue. There he is, the blue and white car with the white roll cage. 3-time MX-5 Super Cup champion in P7, watching all this happen in front of him. He's pulled away for some of the carnage, and so he's been able to get up there towards the front. With the leaders, it's still side by side. Now we've got Lee Britton trying to get back up to 4th now to replace Will Blackwood Chambers in that place in the top 5. The corkscrew is where that contact before between Griffiths and Redford, and this time I think Britton and Blackwood Chambers learnt their lesson from that, and they've managed to hold back and stay in 4th or 5th. But it looks like Britton has got that position done, so he's up into P4 again now. Really is 3 for the lead. They're going to go across the line, I think, only just with a few seconds to spare here as they come towards the end of the lap. With 10 seconds to go, it's going to be close. They will just get to a line before the checkered flag comes out. So they're going to get one more tour around the WeatherTech Laguna Seca Raceway. Yep, with about 2 or 3 seconds to spare. And now it is Griffiths to the lead. Kendall seconds with John Higgins Jr. trying to get P2 down towards Andretti hairpin. The final lap of the season, side by side into the hairpin. And Higgins Jr. goes to 2nd. It could still be John Higgins Jr. to get his 3rd win of the year. I mean, it'll be only could keep just him and Redford and Doble's the only 3 winners in the series, unless Griffiths can take his first win, or so can Matt Kendall. Kendall's been threatening this for the last couple of meetings, getting so quick and so high up the order. He could be a surprise winner if he can get past Higgins and Griffiths if he can make it stick. Lee Britton's not counted out here. He could still be on the podium places. As for Will Blackwood Chambers in P5, he's still holding on. I think that Mikey Doble looks as though he's resigning himself to P6. He's not pushing too hard. I think he realises that P6, even if he gets a couple of points back, one of his worst results, it will still be enough for him to clinch the title, because he knows that Redford is back down in 20th and with no chance whatsoever to try and pick it up. They come up towards the crest for the final time. The last few corners of the series, and Griffiths is going to try and defend for his life here down towards the corkscrew. In over the crest, down at the compression of the hill, a little sideways. Higgins will try and get him back here down the outside line towards Rainy Corner. Through a left-hander. Kendall sends it up the inside to take 2nd place from Higgins. They're still wheel-to-wheel down towards the 2nd to last corner. 2 corners left. It looks as though I think that Tom Griffiths will hold on for this one. Up towards the final corner, little dart out from Kendall, same for Blackwood Chambers. They're going to finish 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Nose tail the sprint to the line. It's going to be a drag race to the checkered flag. Here comes Higgins to the outside line. Higgins, Griffiths side by side at the line, and it is Griffiths who takes the final win of the season by 56 1,000ths of a second. Griffiths takes the victory in the final race of the season. Higgins 2nd, Kendall 3rd, Britton 4th, and Will Blackwood Chambers in 5th. But we believe P6 is enough to, subject to official confirmation, crown Mikey Doble the first ever BRSCC Winter esports champion. Judging by the donuts, I think he knows it. What a fantastic season it's been, and I think, again, subject to confirmation, what an amazing and very worthy champion we've got.
Definitely is. But one thing I do want to know, Scott, is the points difference between John Higgins Jr. and Will Redford, because the gap is from second down to 20th. So has Will Redford, with pushing as hard as he has, lost that second place overall in the championship to John Higgins Jr.?
That's a very good question. He can gain points back, because I think this was one of his worst results of the season, because he goes down increments of 2. So if he finishes in 20th place, that will give him 62 points, and it will count as one of his drop scores. He'll gain back 76 points, because his best worst score that he was dropping was 76 points. He'll score 76, and it's a good point actually, because John Higgins Jr. finished in second place, which was 98. Yeah. That's a difference of 22 points, and the gap between them 25 points. That might well just be second place, I think, for Redford. I'm going to wait to see if Blackwood Chambers updates the points in real time as you look at on my sheet. These are the results for the final race of the season. Tom Griffiths takes his first victory in BRSCC esports, when John Higgins Jr. in second place by half a tenth of a second at the checkered flag. Matt Kendall back on the podium in third place. Lee Britton is fourth. Will Blackwood Chambers fifth. The top 5 were covered by just over a second at the line. And then Mikey Doble, of course, in sixth, which we believe, again, subject to official confirmation, is enough for him to clinch the BRSCC Winter Esports Series car number 88 for Doble Motorsport. An amazing effort all season to pick it up in such dramatic fashion. Luke Herbert ensures the top 7 are covered by 2.5 seconds at the line, one of his best results of the season. Then it goes to 8th place for Keith Dalton, 9th for Steve Roberts, good recovery from him after his dramas tonight, and Andrew Tibbs ensuring he finishes all 3 races in the top 10 tonight. Really good effort from him. Richard Harwood is 11th, Joseph Doble after his first lap spin recovers to 12th, Patrick Fletcher 13th, Tom Selden 14th, and Chris Etheridge rounding out the top 15. The pole man on reverse grid, Rowan Lundy, drops to 16th in the event eventually. Harry England in 17th place, but it's Pete Smith, John Pethitt, Will Redford. What could have been? Of course, I'm sure we'll get a reaction from him at some point in the next few moments when we talk to some of our drivers. But 20th, I think he'll gain some points back for that being one of his worst results of the season. It might well just be enough for him to hold on to second place. Aidan Egger 21st, Richard Wharton 22nd, and then James Riley and Bob Bannister to round out the 24 cars that were racing tonight. And what's been quite an intense and entertaining season comes to a close in unbelievable fashion. It's the conclusion to the finale that we all hoped for. Plenty of drama, plenty of action. And in the end, it looks as though it's given us quite an intense finish to this series, and in the end, given us, I think, by the looks of things, quite a worthy champion.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what a fitting end. All literally, both of the drivers, Mikey Doble and Will Redford, putting it all on the line there in the last race. I mean, that's what you want out of a championship. The championship has been epic. We've had some brilliant rounds, some new drivers coming through later on in the season, but it's certainly been the battle between Mikey Doble and Will Redford for that championship overall, and it just fitting. It came down to the last race and the close battle between them. I mean, what a grandstand finish for the final race, but unfortunately Will lost out there, probably pushing it a little bit too hard, and the ever consistent Mikey Doble at the moment we believe is the championship's winner here in the inaugural season, the BRSCC MX-5 Cup, and it's just been amazing, mate. But I'm really looking forward to hearing what the drivers have to say.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's start with the man of the moment then, because I think we've got him on the screen. Let's bring him in, but of course I'm sure he'll want to have a few words about how he found that entire evening's worth of racing and how it's come out. But again, we state again, just to be sure, subject to official confirmation, Mikey Doble, you are provisionally the first ever BRSCC esports champion in this winter series. How's that feel?
Yeah, over the moon with that. Really pleased to have finally come home the victor in the series, in the inaugural BRSCC esports series. Yeah, I think thanks a lot to Will for organising it, for you guys for commentary all the way through the season. It's been a great league, and looking forward to the next one.
I think we can safely say it's an understatement when we say that how that third race played out and how essentially the series concluded probably couldn't have been more dramatic if we tried. I mean, even yes, it probably could believe it if it was a script, but given the fact that essentially all you had to do was to try and finish ahead of Will as much as possible and to keep him at bay. At one point, you were side by side battling for position, about 4th or 5th place. I mean, the tension must have been through the roof after those first 2 races, mustn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a nice tension, I can assure you of that. But kind of where I've done well this season is to keep the car out of trouble, and especially sometimes like tonight where I didn't have the overall pace to win the race against Will, but to try and keep it clean and come through the pack without any accidents is kind of where I've gone well this season. And I just think, yeah, the race 3 there kind of summed it up. Obviously, Will had to be more aggressive than I did because I was ahead of him in the championship, and I still could have finished second and still won the championship. But yeah, I was had a close moment with Higgins Jr. at one point when I thought it was all going to go pear-shaped, and all of a sudden Will was back on my rear bumper. But yeah, sadly for him, he got spat into the wall after contact with Tom Griffiths through the corkscrew, and then from there I was thinking I don't need to be in this fight. I can just get out of this when I see that Will was pretty much circulating in last place. So it wasn't the most entertaining final few laps, but it was enough to win the championship, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, we did see at one point when you backed off. I initially thought it was some kind of a slowdown penalty, but then a thought crept through my mind that maybe, as you just mentioned, that you'd kind of seen the battle going on ahead and had a couple of points where it had gotten incredibly close, and you'd almost made contact and thought, hold on a minute, I just need to get the points to finish here and get it done because Will's quite far back now. Was that essentially the case? You simply just drop back, let the first 5 cars have their own fight, and as you've done so many times this year, just bring it home and bank what you needed to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, I thought when I first arrived on the back bumper of Lee, I thought, right, try and get past him as quick as possible, and I knew I had the pace to pull away because like Will and I were pretty much a little bit quicker than everyone else throughout tonight. But then I was thinking, well, actually, it's the last race of the season. Everyone who maybe hasn't had a win yet this year is going to throw everything at it, and they're not going to let my championship get in the way of that. So I thought this race meant more to them than it did to me in terms of finishing on the podium or even winning. So once everyone else started queuing up behind me and Lee was defending like his life depending on it, I needed to get out of that situation and just sit back and watch for the rest of the race.
Well, that you did, and I think we've worked out that if you guys had actually ended up tied on points, but neither of you won the race, I think you'd have still won it on count back of so many second places, which is testament to sort of how points minded, how championship minded that you've been essentially since the start of it. I think ultimately, all we can really have to say is a massive congratulations. Aside from thanks that you've given, which we appreciate, is there anything else in particular from the team or any sponsors that you got that you want to thank for succeeding and for what might lie ahead in the future?
Yeah, I mean, just thanks to everyone that tunes in and watches us. Thanks to grandparents and mum and dad and brothers and aunties and uncles that watch from home every week. Very much enjoy it, and yeah, looking forward to good seasons racing in the real world and on the simulator.
I guess the real world plans are still under wraps at the moment, no exclusives.
Yeah, no exclusives just yet, but keep your eyes peeled. The next couple of weeks there'll be something very good announcement coming out, hopefully. So there we go.
Excellent. We'll keep our eyes peeled for that. Well, listen, again, a decent way to start the season anyway before you've even turned the wheel on real track. You clinched yourself a title in the sim. You've driven superbly all season. Very well deserved. Mikey Doble, first ever BRSCC esports champion in this winter series. Congratulations, and we'll see you on track either virtual or in the real world, I'm sure, very soon, wherever that might be. Well done, mate. You've driven superbly.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Well, we've had one title protagonist. I think we need to go from what was joy to, I'm sure, angst after that one. We've heard for joins us now. Well, there's not much more. There's not really anything I can say that's either going to make it feel better or sound better, really. You drove incredibly in those first 2 races, did everything you need to do to get the points, and then race 3 happened, and it just really wasn't how you wanted, was it?
I mean, if you look back on all the other rounds, I should have expected it. I mean, something like that has happened every single time, and it sort of tops it off that in the last round, in the last race, it was Mikey's brother. But the start itself wasn't too bad. I got a bit of damage from it, and I did push on, and I was catching back up, and I got back up to Mikey, and then I got a bit impatient, I think, because I knew that in my head, if he got into the lead, he was going to go. So I had to stay with him, and that was what I was trying to do. And then I sent a move on, I think it was Tom Griffiths, and we got stuck together, and then I got spat out into a wall, which is just classic iRacing. So, it's disappointing, but looking at the end result, maybe if I was more patient, I would have won anyway because Mikey didn't even win. So it's, you can't have hindsight, and it's disappointing, but I gave it my best shot, and I think the first 2 races showed that.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And there was a moment where I think we realised that anyone watching at home would have realised that of all the cars that had the spin at the opening corner, it was Mikey's brother Joseph, and of all the cars they've ended up tagging him, it was yourself. And I immediately thought there were going to be 1 or 2 conspiracy theorists in the comments thinking that there'd been some kind of a conversation, but I'm pretty certain that it was just unfortunately wrong place, wrong time for both drivers on that side. But given how you performed all season, including tonight, you picked up 8 wins. You weren't that far off in the championship in terms of points that you gained, so you got 2nd place. You've shown some incredible pace all the way through. I mean, looking back on high points of the season, if we forget the fact of how tonight's played out and how the series has played out, you've had a fantastic run in some of these races. The wins that you have had been very much deserved, and you've always been a constant front runner. So I think on that side, you take confidence that you've been one of the fastest guys out there on the grid, and that has to mean something, including the wins that you've taken. It must mean something from what you've taken away from this series.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was telling this to Will Blackwell Chambers before, I've actually learned a lot racing this series on how to win a championship. And at the start of the year, I was very much, flat out all the time. And I never really tried to control the race if I was out in front, which, it looks impressive when you win by a massive margin, but when you make a mistake and end up binning it, it's not great, is it? So I've learned to sort of calm it down towards the end of the year, and I've learned, overall how to win a championship. I mean, you look at Mikey, and he's been consistent throughout. He hasn't made any mistakes, and even though he's maybe not as fast as me, he's still up there with me because the car and with the draft and whatnot, it allows it to happen. And he's ended up coming away with a win just from being consistent and taking it easy, and that is something that I've taken away. And in the end of it, 2nd place, I'm not, it could be a lot worse. I'm happy with the result. Well, I'm not happy with the result, but I am, I'm happy with how I've performed throughout the season.
Yeah, I think you should be, because obviously you've put up some great results, and you and Mikey have pushed each other all the way through from start to finish on this one. I've even got you on the screen now, nose to tail, on the slow motion replay whilst we're talking to you guys, and that's pretty much how it's been all season between you two, and also the likes of John and everyone else has been up there towards the front. In terms of now going forwards, obviously, if there's any real world racing plans that are under wraps that are still NDA, of course, then we're not going to, or should say anything, of course. But what, if anything, lies ahead now for 2023? Is it more sim racing? Are you still looking to get back out on track for real, budget and opportunities depending? What lies ahead for you now?
So in the real world, I'll be back out in the Civic Cup. It'll be my 2nd full season racing anything in real world. So, I'm looking forward to taking everything I've learned last year and even everything that I've learned throughout this championship, and hopefully challenging for the overall championship. On the sim side, obviously I'm a member of Apex Racing Academy and the Apex Racing team. So, we've got special events, big events coming up. The closest one, I think, the next couple of weeks will be the Sebring 12 hour. So, full focus on that now, and a bit of testing in the real world, and then it'll all kick off in early April.
Yeah, certainly does, and it's good to have yourself and everyone else in the Civic Cup racing back on the BRSCC package. And as you say, if you can use everything you've learned, which I'm sure you will, you've learned to full effect, and certainly you'll be up there fighting towards the front if all their elements come together. Also have to say as well, I mean, again, for what it's worth, the commiseration for missing out, but for the driving that you have done, once again, as I said to Mike, you've driven superbly all season from the outset with the 3 wins that you took at Alton Park, and you dominated that way. So if you're on the same sort of form as you're in Civic Cup, I look forward to seeing you in on the podium at some point going forward, if you can carry on that same form in a Honda Civic. So well done. I'm glad you're taking it on the chin as much as you can, and yeah, we'll see you in April for the first Civic Cup race. I'm sure it'll be mega.
Thanks, mate.
Good stuff. Well done to Will for the races that he won. And the final man to speak is the man who's been pretty much taken the helm of this all a lot and done a lot of the admin work, and deserves, I think, pretty much in terms of organising it, putting it all together, I think, along with everyone else that's helped him, a massive amount of praise and a massive amount of plaudits, because he's done a sensational job overseeing it from start to finish, and that's Will Blackwell Chambers. So I think, first of all, Will, I think on behalf of me, on behalf of the club and everyone else and who's been involved in it, the drivers, I'm sure they'll say it later on, but public on the broadcast here, you've done a phenomenal job looking after this league, overseeing this league, with the assistance a little bit from me where possible, and Lee and everyone else. So I think you can consider this a job well done. You've done a fantastic job, and it's been, I think, a roaring success, this first esports series.
No, I fully agree, and thank you very much for your kind words, and thanks to the BRSCC to kind of giving me the opportunity to give this a go. What was it? We just started off with some emails and a quick proposal, and here we are. I think we've got a huge amount to be proud of, especially I think being the first sort of club, racing club in the UK to have hosted a formal esports series, underneath that banner of the club, and I think it's been a big success. Had a lot of positive feedback from all the drivers. I think another really nice thing is I think people have definitely made some friends out of it, and met people they wouldn't normally have met. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it's gone.
Yeah, I think likewise, and I think the good thing is that that's a good point you touched on as well. Is that we've brought together drivers from a vast array of different series. You've got drivers that have raced not just in Mazda MX-5s, but BMW Compact Cup, City Car, C1s, Fiesta Juniors, with Will Redford, Civic Cup, all these different series and champions, BMW Compact Cup as well. All these different champions and series that, as you say, wouldn't normally talk to each other on a race weekend because they're all amongst their own little communities and little paddocks and the drivers and teams they've got. I'd like to think now that at least some of these guys, if they're on the same race weekend, that they'll be able to, they've made these friendships, they can go and chat to them, they'll be across paddocks talking to them, and who knows, there might be some interest where some drivers might want to switch at some point if they're looking for future options. They're racing in one BRSCC championship and they see they've got a friend that they've raced against in this series that's in something else across the way on the other side of the paddock, might spark their interest to keep it a go, but and keep them within the BRSCC sphere as a whole. And I think what's nice is that because you've got so many different drivers that have taken it up from so many different championships and series, it just shows how much a diverse pool of races and talent that we've got to bring them all together, to give them opportunity to race amongst each other, and to kind of put it as almost like a mini all-stars in terms of who's the best of the best. Although, and this is, I think we can safely say, those who race in real-world drive in real life, which is mainly the Mazda and BMW drivers, kind of still have the measure in these cars, given they've got given experience in the cars they've driven. So I think in some ways it wasn't too unsurprising to see the likes of yourself and Tom Griffiths and Matt Kendall and Will Redford, even though he's in a front-wheel drive car, and Mikey Doble, those guys. It wasn't that surprising to see them up towards the front and being the main front runners in this series, don't you think?
Oh, and that's really fair, and that's something that we can build on for next season, because what I'm hoping as well from this season is people are going to see the success it's been. It's been on TV. Big thanks to Apex TV for all of your help getting this series through, and we can now start pushing towards, obviously not organising now, but organise for next year. I'm hoping that people go back to their, as you say, their paddocks, their series, and say, hang on, I did this over the winter, it kept me entertained and it was absolutely awesome fun, and we'll start to again continue to build interest in sim racing and bring more real life racers back onto the sim and sort of get them enjoying this world away from weekend racing.
Yeah, and I think what's also handy is that there's, I think going forward, there's going to be quite a few different other options that could be possibilities going forward. Obviously, what we're saying here is nothing official, so we're just it's still loosely talking here of their side of things. I think two cars that will be quite intriguing to watch going forwards, that will be ones to watch for, will certainly be of interest to people in certain paddocks within BRSCC. One, I think, is definitely, we've got a Formula 4 1600 on its way, which I'm sure that will at some point spawn some kind of a Formula 4 series, because let's face it, I've seen plenty of the Formula 4 community that are also sim racers have seen this coming out and have fallen over themselves for waiting for it to come out. There was a recent video that came out of its first run, still in work in progress, on a work in progress version of a new circuit that's coming, which is Jerez in Spain. The other one that was kind of officially put out in the last day or two, or last 24 hours, is the Clios. Because, of course, if those BRSCC, within one of the new series that we have, the Evolution Trophy, there is a new series by the guys at Cook Sport Performance, the Cook Sport Renault Cup, so who knows? Could be conversations there, and that could turn something as well. But there's BMWs in here as well. There's one or two Hondas. There's other single-seater stuff. There's GTs. There's TCR cars. The possibilities going forward, I think you'd agree, are quite broad, and not just iRacing. There might be some possibilities with one or two mods, potentially a Assetto Corsa if that works out. I think this is the start of something that could hopefully snowball into something a little bit bigger across the series, whether it's races spread out across the year or year on year, at least at some kind of a winter competition. I think what we've got here is something that is going to hopefully expand a bit more and become eventually a proper dedicated esports sector for BRSCC that's only going to grow.
Yeah, and the other thing we need to understand in the future is the appetite for BRSCC members that may not necessarily have the funds to go racing for real, but it doesn't mean they can't go sim racing. That is the joy of sim racing. The cost point of entry is so much lower, And something we can definitely look at in the future is bringing sort of members of the BRSCC, people who love motorsport and want to get involved, but maybe can't quite get on the circuit for whatever reason, and start bringing them into this online world, which, believe me, from what I've been doing this evening, it's just as hard to do this. Actually, let's be honest, it's harder. I haven't won a race this season. It's harder to do this than it is to do real life. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting areas we can start expanding into.
Yeah, I think not to put it down on it, I think given the competition that looks like you're going to have in Super Cup, it's going to be even tougher for you to win in this one. So you have to put your elbows out even more than you did last year to make that done. But I'm certain if you can make the car work like you did last year, then I think you'll be just fine, I'm sure. But either way, I think we have to give some thanks whilst you're here. Please stand here for the rest of this interview bit, because just to close it off, because I think he deserves to, because there are the players that we need to give thanks to. We need to give thanks to Will. We need to give thanks to Lee Britton, to a couple of the other guys. Again, I'm sure we'll remind me of some of the other guys we need to thank as well, because forgive me, their names escape me for the time being. And feel free to
Jack Noller and Matt Kendall have been a big help as well, especially sort of the back end of this season. Once we started getting going, sort of helping out here, there, and everywhere, and coming up with some good ideas for next season. So big thanks to them, and obviously, thanks to Mikey Doble and Will Redford for kind of leading the way and sort of continue to push all of us slower drivers forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, had one of your guys in the back that's been helping working on things like liveries and stuff on top of that as well. So big thank you to him as well for all of his efforts.
Yeah, Brandon Blakesley's done a huge amount of liveries for us, so that's been a massive help.
Yeah, indeed. He has to get thanks as well. I have to say thank you to Nankang Tyres, who've been supporting this series. Of course, their logo's been emblazoned all across the front bonnet of all the cars in this series. So that one, I believe there'll be some kind of a little award on its way of some kind from Nankang or to Mikey, but we'll work that out post-season. Thank you also to Will, of course, to Will and to Will Blackwood Chambers Racing for him with all the work that he's done. To Sim1 Simulators, to Lee Britton, of course, and to him for his effort in getting part in this one as well. Big thank you to everyone at Apex Racing TV for hosting the live streams and producing them for us. Great to see Willis Racing going on for all 6 of the events that we put on, which is excellent to see. Thank you also to iRacing for the platform that we've had, and for the racing that's been produced on the circuits and the cars that we've used as well. And also shout out as well to one of the club main partners, which is runyourfleet.com, which you've always wanted to shout out in that one as well. Go and check them out, because they're one of the leading fleet specialists for businesses as well. And a big thank you to all the drivers and all the teams that have been competing in this as well, that have signed up and competed across the season. And for those who have stayed the course and gone all the way through the season up until the end. And also thank you to everyone who is, whether watching live or watched back post live stream, watched the coverage and shared it and supported it from your living rooms, wherever you've been around the world, or at least in the UK, being a part of it as well. Thanks to Andy, thanks to Lee, and also for tonight as well, to Sam, who's been on production as well, for those guys. Just everyone who's been part of it as well. It's been absolutely magnificent, and I'm pretty confident this will be the start of something pretty good now that we've got BRSCC esports up and running. What happens in the future, only time will tell, but we'll see what drivers want, we'll see what's in the pipeline, and we'll go from there. But for the last time on broadcast, again, once more, one more final thank you very much to everyone who's made this happen. From myself, Scott Woodwis, from Will, from Andy Thompson, from Sam, also from behalf of Lee Thompson as well, and everyone that's part of this series, Apex Racing TV and BRSCC and the entire grid. Thank you ever so much for being part of it, and onwards and upwards to the future of more esports races, and of course real world racing. The real BRSCC season gets underway March 18th and 19th on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. If you want to be there and find out all the events and all the championships and series the club does, go to brscc.co.uk for all the information, and follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, and we're also getting TikTok started up as well. Watch for that in the coming days and weeks. Right, that's enough for me talking. Thank you very much once again, one last time, and we'll see more action very soon, both in the real world and in the sim with the BRSCC. But until then, thank you, good night.